Good morning. We are discussing Torah Ohr, which is the background, the source material, supplemental material to Hemshech Hayim Beis at its conclusion. Maimer and Mikates, Chanukah Maimer, called Mik Hashem Elokeinu Ha'Magbiyah L'Sheves, and the beard of the Maimer. So we're in the middle of the beard, closing in on the end of it, actually, on page 39 in Torah Ohr, 39d. And this is going to help us understand the flow, as well as some background, as well as possible conclusion of where Ayin Beis would have headed had the Rebbe Rashab continued writing, because it's based on these Maimarim. So let's review where we're up to. We're talking about explaining Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam, that the soul of a human being is compared to a ner, a candle which consists of a wick, the fuel oil, and the fire, light that it creates. And what is that, spiritually speaking, in Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam? It's the psila, the wick of the divine soul on its own, is a defined and structured form of love and reverence of God. Ava v'yira kol b'chol nafshecha. That's how it is in Gan Eden. But it's limited. It's like ava kemayim, we learned, like water. Water, even if it's a great amount of water, ultimately it will be depleted. And the purpose of all of existence is that the neshama should come down below into this world. And here there's a body and an animal soul, and there's resistance and darkness and difficulties, and that in turn creates an even deeper love called b'chol moedecha, like fire. So even though the fire is also limited, because the fire is also the finite entity, but it can create and light another candle, kindle and ignite another fire ad infinitum, to the point that it reaches ma'oid, because your blig vul, even though the person's blig vul is going out of his own limits, out of his own comfort zone, which the neshama does not do in Gan Eden, only down below, yofashah achas b'tshuva ma'asim tevim, through tshuva down in this world. But because it goes out of its comfort zone, it in turn triggers and generates an ein sof mamish, the moed hamiti blig vul mamish, like the example of the fire, and that's why it's called Ohr chayzer. Because it's like light that creates an infinite amount of, an ongoing, perpetual, infinite amount of energy. Okay. That's so far what we learned. Let's see what else to add. And that is Rabbi Yehuda, like we learned, the Mosam, the Mora Leha, that Rabbi Yehuda was in that type of level, beyond the Keli. And I explained this because he was involved in the Zikin, as we explained earlier. So therefore his Torah was a level of Torah Ohr, of a blig vul type of Torah, even higher than the Kelim. And that's why he says, and then he added one more thing why it's called Ohr. So before he said Ohr, because it's a blig vul, like Ohr continues to create one light, another light, and more light with no end. But here he has Ohr hanimshech ma'abirur de klipas nega, because it's an energy, an Ohr that is generated through the birur of the klipas nega, which he said earlier is the seichel of the nefesh abamis, nefesh achsichlis, nefesh achayunis, and that which is rooted in akudim and akudim. So it's a very high level, it's an intense energy, that birur. And Elosh Ayidei concluded, but then further than that, not only does it is mevar nefesh abam, it does mevar klipas nega, but it also ultimately through this comes mamay lamata Torah Ohr, which is what he said earlier, that it's not just a blig vul relative to the person going out of his own structure, but actually is mamshech the Torah Ohr mamay lamata. So he's already mentioned now Torah Ohr. However, we have to go back now and understand the process, because that's it. We said the neshama, it's avodah on its own through Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, and it brings to V'haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol nafshecha, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, and all the way to b'chol meidecha. B'chol levavcha means the animal soul is also engaged. B'chol nafshecha, like he said, is the level of nafshecha with the neshama on its own, so it's still defined. And then ultimately leads it seems like the b'chol avavcha leads the b'chol nafshecha, the b'chol ma'idecha, but it's l'mayla ma'id, bligvul. But now, what does Ner Mitzvah and Torah Ohr add to the discussion? So I pointed out yesterday that here he didn't speak yet that necessarily that we're learning Torah, is that this Aveda of B'chol Meidecha opens up the person to be able to be a keli for Torah Ohr, which just comes down from a mile lamata. That's what he said so far. But now he's going to talk about the actual dynamics involved in Ner Mitzvah and Torah Ohr in the process, which we already learned in the first mimer, in the initial mimer. This is a beer, but the beer is elaborating upon all these points. So we'll continue reading from middle of page 39D. It's a if you look at the page numbers, it's 78th column, the second column. And the pages can be found in ayinbays.com. Okay, so here we go. So the line begins, Lamata Erein Sof Mamish B'chinas V'Torah Ohr. So the Alter Rebbe continues now. V'kol zeh hu b'chinas ner haneshama. Remember, at the bottom of the previous page, he said, L'vad inyan shnei ha'b'chinas ner. Two levels of candles. One is the neshama, and the other is Ner Mitzvah. And he said, and each one has all three elements, the wick, the fuel, the oil, and the light that it creates. But till now, we've been just talking, he's about Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom. He didn't yet speak about Ner Mitzvah V'Torah Ohr. So now he goes over, he says, V'kol zeh b'chinas ner haneshama. This is all about the Ner haneshama. Similar to when he spoke in the original Maimer, that first he spoke about the neshama's work in training and harnessing the animal soul to love God. And that animal soul in turn generates even a stronger energy than the nefesh alakiz, the divine soul, has on its own. Like we just learned. And now he says like this, and this is already an explanation, because in the original Maimer, he just went over to Ner Mitzvah. He didn't explain exactly the relationship between Mitzvah and Neshama. We understood it as such that after the Neshama does its work, the Mitzvah adds a whole dimension that can lead the Neshama to even higher, greater places. The Nefesh HaBamish should be elevated even to the Makif and all the way to Torah Ohr. But now he's going to spell it out more. So he says like this. So all this is about the Neshama. In the language of the Maimer itself, earlier on page 38c, he said, Zeh neshal neshama shemis bonus nefesh alikis atzma. That's from this bonus nefesh alikis atzma, without any additional assistance. But now he says like this. However, ein neshama b'lei mitzvah. Interesting expression. A neshama, it doesn't exist without a mitzvah. It doesn't mean there's no neshama. He means to say a neshama cannot really fulfill its purpose without mitzvah. Ein neshama b'lei mitzvah, but that's how he calls it. Ein neshama b'lei mitzvah. K'lo yam oretz chassid. You say in the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, lo yam oretz chassid. A person who's ignorant can't be a chassid. V'lo bur yirechet. And a bur is like a pustakela. A bur is like a thick. How do you translate bur? A thick, not thick skin.
Coarse.
A coarse person, yeah.
Like a real boar.
Yeah, like a boar.
Yeah. But
Like
what is it? What's the proof he's bringing? That the neshama can't, even if a neshama is a beautiful soul, but if it does not have intelligence, meaning it's an amoritz, it's ignorant. And bur is also there's a type of like a piece of wood, like you said before, coarse, crass. Can be truly a person who is who's yorichet, which means he's afraid of sin. Why? Because the person doesn't have the tools. Yes, of course, a person can be technically do good things even if he's ignorant, and can be a fear sin and avoid sin even if he doesn't have, even if he's worse. But he doesn't really have the proper tools to really refine himself. So therefore, that's what he's saying, that neshama needs to have a mitzvah. Now it's interesting. Amoritz, you'd think the opposite is not a mitzvah; it's Torah, learning Torah, and the same thing. Bur also learning Torah. But first of all, Torah is also a mitzvah. So I think he's talking here in general that the neshama needs Torah and mitzvahs. But he's saying right now mitzvah. Let's see if that is exactly precise, or he means it in v'gam mitzvah b'lei neshama ain't a klum. And the same is true the other way around. A mitzvah without a soul performing it is also meaningless. Is also nothing. What's a mitzvah? A mitzvah doesn't exist without someone performing a mitzvah. The fact that God says, for example, keep Shabbos, or learn Torah, or put on film, or light candles, that is predicated upon the fact that there's a person to do it. So we see here how both need each other. You could basically say in simple English, the mitzvah is the tools, the instruments for the neshama to implement its purpose. And the mitzvah, without a neshama, you don't have anyone implementing. It's just a tool chest. So you need both. The divine tools is the mitzvah and the mitzvahs, and the neshama is the one that performs it, the one that fulfills it. Basically, the messenger, the ambassador, the shliach. So therefore, you need God mitzvah b'lei neshama ein klum. Ki kol ha'emer ein li ela teira, afil teira ein li. So now he's speaking another expression here. It says someone who says, I don't need anything but Torah. So it says also that even Torah he doesn't have. So in other words, you need Torah and mitzvahs. So Torah would, so interesting, in other words, he's comparing Torah would be like someone who's a neshama. What's the proof? Gam mitzvah b'lei neshama ein klum. What's the proof from this Maimer Chazal? Person says, I have nothing but Torah. So afil Torah ein li. You need a mitzvah. How does that prove that a mitzvah without a neshama is not complete? That's a question I'm posing. I'm not sure. It's an interesting proof he brings. So
we're just learning about people that don't need mitzvahs, except once a year. So what quality do they have? And that shows you. From that, we can learn about this.
I'm not sure what you're saying, but I'm not sure what you're saying. So
like the Rosh being, was it Reb Shmuel that we were learning about?
I asked a very simple question. He just said a mitzvah without a neshama is nothing. So he's saying, and he brings proof that if someone says, I only have Torah and no mitzvahs, see, he doesn't even have Torah. So Torah needs to have mitzvahs. How is that a proof that a mitzvah without neshama is nothing? That's what I'm asking.
What's the purpose of a mitzvah? The purpose is to connect.
That I know. A mitzvah without a neshama, I understand. But what's the proof that he's bringing?
The proof. Okay, sorry.
The proof. I'm talking about the proof. The logic, of course. A mitzvah is just a tool. Like I said, you can't have a mitzvah can't be performed without a soul performing it. That's clear. But he's bringing a proof. I'm not clear how this proof proves anything. So le'maritz chassid. So it means you need to have mitzvah. That's okay. That's that. I think the proof is an interesting twist in the proof. I think what he's trying to say is someone who says, I only have Torah, which means Torah is enough, but I'm not bringing myself into the picture, then even Torah he doesn't have. That sounds to me what he's trying to say, which is not really necessarily the literal meaning of the Chazal. He's saying, only Ela Torah, I only have Torah, meaning I don't have a neshama. There's afil Torah ein li. I think the Maimer Chazal, Momash Shor, says Torah and mitzvahs or Torah and gemilas chasadim. So they're talking about if a person says, I only have Torah and I don't have mitzvahs. Here the Alter Rebbe is teaching it. If he says he only has Torah, meaning he only has so-called like a mitzvah, but he doesn't have the neshama, it's nothing. That's what it sounds like he's saying. But I need to look into it a little more and to understand what the proof is exactly.
Didn't you say? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Do you understand my question?
Yes.
I'm talking about the proof.
Sure.
I'm not asking.
No,
Obviously,
I
a
know.
mitzvah without an neshama. The
No,
question is, how does this prove anything?
Oh, I see. Well, I was just going to point out that you said that the Rashbi had to go out again. Didn't you say?
But what does this have to do with this proof?
I guess I'm missing it. I'm sorry.
What does it have to do with this proof? He's trying to say that a mitzvah without a neshama is nothing. And he's bringing a statement from our sages. The statement says that someone that says, I only have Torah and nothing else, then even Torah he doesn't have. How is that a proof that a mitzvah without a neshama is nothing? That's simply what I'm asking.
It's like you said it just now. If you don't have the neshama, so
that's the raya from the Maimar Chazal. Ainli ela Torah means I have Torah without a neshama. That's what I'm saying. I know I'm suggesting that.
You said,
but it's not the simple interpretation of the Chazal. That's all I'm saying.
No. It's the idea, because you could have a mitzvah, but the neshama is the one that is connecting you, the mitzvah, to the nefesh habahamis.
Apparently, that's what he's trying to prove from there. That if you say you only have Torah and you don't have neshama, it's not complete.
Even though that this is a question a little bit, because we see, especially today, going to Mitzvahim, people, you want them to do a mitzvah, that's it. Because the mitzvah is spoiled. But still, in the Inyan, if you have the neshama, the mitzvah is penetrating in you. But Lamaisa, the mitzvah is the main thing.
Okay, I think the contrast is this: Lo yam oretz chosid, meaning you need to have Torah, or what he calls here mitzvah, and then the other way around. If you're not an amoretz and you have only Torah without neshama, it's also lacking. That's what it looks like he says. The neshama needs a mitzvah, and the mitzvah needs a neshama.
Yeah.
That's what it seems like he's trying to say. But it's still interesting, because if you look in the Maimar Chazal, he's talking about Torah mitzvahs, I think, or Torah and Gmilas Chasad. I will look more into this before I really finalize it, but that's what it looks like he's saying.
Rabbi Jacobson, does kavana have anything to do in this discussion? That it says that the mitzvah without a kavana is a body without a soul. So would it fair to say that Torah provides a perspective?
Then why does
the
Alter Rebbe is not bashful and he knows this? Why doesn't he say it then?
Oh, no, but Ayin Beis said it. The Rebbe Rashab said it.
But why is the Alter Rebbe never mention it even? Why doesn't he mention it? That would be very nice if he mentioned it, but he doesn't.
Okay.
He mentions a different Maimar Chazal. He's mentioning Torah and Einli Ela Torah. Does he mean Torah Kavana, the Neshama Kavana? That's apparently what we're trying to interpret here.
Yeah, probably. The Kavana, the Neshama.
Yeah, I'm just going by what we
most likely what he means.
Itself. That's all.
Yeah, but the Rebbe, first of all, the Alter Rebbe was long before the Rebbe Rashab and Ayin Beis. So he's not relying on Ayin Beis to understand the Torah Ohr. I'm trying to understand what the Alter Rebbe is saying here. The Torah here, Einli Ela Torah, meaning Torah without neshama, without kavanah, maybe. So kavanah without a mitzvah, neshama without a mitzvah is not complete, and a mitzvah without kavanah, neshama is not complete. That's more or less what he's saying here. That sounds right? Yeah, I think so.
And there are conditions.
Okay.
We just had in the Tanya, you can do a mitzvah without any kavanah, anything, and learning Torah he was more liberal about. You didn't need kavanah. So I don't understand what they're talking about with kavanah. Learning Torah.
I'm not sure what.
And today's Tanya also is much harder. But today's Tanya
look. He's not talking about today's Tanya. We're trying to understand the Torah Ohr. To me, I'm trying to understand what he says here. I don't think the Tanya is going to help here, frankly. But
same author.
Okay. Bottom line is, we need to have both. I just wanted to look something up. There's a footnote from the Rebbe where he brings this Maimer Chazal. I wanted to see if it's relevant here. Let's see if I can find it quickly. If I could, good. If not, we move on. I don't see it. Okay. Amen. Okay. I'll look it up later. Fine. So therefore, bottom line is, Ulechein Tzarech Li is Gam Shneim.
Lo Yamar Chosid, he means to say, you could have the neshama and everything, but in order to reach Hashem, you need the mitzvah. The neshama itself is not enough. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Ulechein Tzarech Li is Gam Shneim. And that's why you need both of them. You need the neshama and mitzvah. So that now comes to explain how Ner Mitzvah is going to add to Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. By Inyan. So what's the Inyan in this? Ki Ner Mitzvah, because it says Ner Mitzvah, that the mitzvah is like a candle. Sha mitzvah hi ner. A mitzvah is like a candle. Hainu psila. Like we learned before, that the ikar of a ner is the wick. So a mitzvah is like the wick. Va'inyan, ki advorim shenase ben a mitzvah and gam kem elam atayu. Just like we spoke earlier, that the things of this Gashmizdika world, Konsum elam atayu, he says, the things that a mitzvah, what we do a mitzvah is done with Gashmizdika things, physical items. And where are those physical items? They're rooted in the world of Tayu. So what does that mean? So a mitzvah, like we spoke before, the neshama, the nefesh alikis is like a wick that transforms the shemen, the seichel of the nefesh abamis, which is klipas nega that's rooted in Tayu, and instead of it serving its own bahamizdik, its animal needs, its own selfish needs, the seichel is now being directed toward godliness. So the same thing as a mitzvah. A mitzvah is a wick. It's a defined mitzvah. It has a limit. Every mitzvah has its shear. It's kav amida. It's measured. It's midah v'shir. And that mitzvah takes physical items and turns it into a divine fire. That's what a mitzvah is. So very similar to what a neshama is. But now he's adding what a mitzvah is adding to the neshama. But there's something more to a mitzvah. And that's the addition. What's the more? He says the avol. So that's what a mitzvah is. Ach a mitzvah gam came b'chinas makif. A mitzvah is not just taking physical items and directing them to what God wants you to do. The mitzvah is also the level of makif. Like we learned before, it's Ratzon Hashem, and it's the levushim. He talked before about mitzvah. Yeshua, as he speaks about that connected to Sheker Deshana, mitzvah and levushim, v'nikra levush malchus, Makifim. So he says like this: a mitzvah gam ke b'chinas shenimshach ayidekim a mitzvah makif elyon. Because a mitzvah is not just you taking the physical world and elevating it. You're elevating it to Ratzon Elyon, and Ratzon is makif. The Eibishter's Ratzon says, I want you to take wool and make from it tzitzis and wear tzitzis. I want you to take the animal hide and make from it cloth, parchment for tefillin, for sefer Torah, for mezuzah, for tefillin, for mezuzahs. So you're not just refining the physical world, you're elevating it to a level of makif, the Ratzon Elyon. Asher kedushanim mitzvos shenam shel adei akim mitzvos makif elyon. So the mitzvahs are now being mamshel makif elyon. This, the neshama on its own does not have. The neshama has Ner Hashem, it's a divine energy. And like a psila, it burns with a certain love and reverence. But now the mitzvah is adding something. The mitzvah is like adding this instrument that's adding this element that it is also refining the physical world, and it's connecting it to the mamshech hamakif elyon. Ulechein hamitzvahs hein levushim. That's why mitzvahs are compared to garments. Torah is compared to something you ingest. But if you remember in Tanya, he speaks about in chapter 4 and 5, he speaks that mitzvahs are levushim. It's like you're dressing yourself in the garments of Hashem. Ubig de malchus, like the garments, the royal garments. So when you do a mitzvah, you are clothing yourself in the garment, in divine garments. That through the mitzvah, the neshama gets bound in the tzura chaim, bound in the tzura chaim, in the you could say in the ultimate binding of Hashem, of life. He mentioned that earlier as well when he gave the example of the slingshot. He said that Makif malbishim es hanefesh bereisha v'adragel liyesrura b'tzira chaim es Hashem mamish. So there he explained like a slingshot. If you want something to be elevated to a very high level, you have to put it inside of a garment, into the pouch. If you remember, he spoke about the magema, he spoke about the pouch of the slingshot that allows it to shoot. And so therefore the levushim, when a person does mitzvahs, so a neshama without mitzvahs is a holy soul. It's a divine soul. But what's lacking is levushim. It's lacking the tools and instruments that the expression. So you say that person is a good Jew at heart. That's fine. But for it to express itself, it needs garments. Garments is the expression. It's like someone who has a good mind and good and powerful emotions, but there's no machshava dibur ma'aseh, there's no levushim. There are no garments to express it. So mitzvahs is essentially fanning the flames of the soul and expressing it in a real way. So when a person wakes up and davens, or a person puts on tzitzis, or puts on tefillin, or before Shabbos lights a candle, or keeps Shabbos, kashrus, all of that is taking the neshama of the person and putting on the divine garments that allow it to express itself and not just remain dormant within. Let me explain it even further. There's a question that's asked. You know, Rabbi Eliezer ben Derdaya, his whole life, he lived a life full of sin. There was no sin that he did not transgress, we're told. But it says, at the end of his life, right before he died, he bent down and he cried, and with that tremendous cry of regret of what kind of life he lived, it says he acquired the whole world to come. That was the power of his tshuva. So the Arizal asks a question, okay, fine, tshuva can catapult you, can propel you into a whole different state, a whole paradigm shift. That's the power of tshuva. One cry, one b'shah with one ker, one shift. But the bottom line is, how could you go into Elam Haba without levushim? It would be like someone didn't learn Torah all their life, didn't do any mitzvahs, and then they do tshuva, true tshuva, and their tshuva is accepted. But they don't have the tools, they never learned. So they go into Elam Haba, they sit down to learn Torah, or not sit. They're trying to learn Torah, but they never learned Aleph Beis. They don't know how to read Hebrew. In other words, the neshama has earned its right to go, but it doesn't have the tools to appreciate it. And the same thing with mitzvahs. That's Torah. Same thing with mitzvahs. Now, what? If you don't have the levushim, it's like a person who suddenly earns his way to go into a very bright room, but he doesn't have the proper eyeglasses to appreciate it. He doesn't have the proper tools to appreciate it. So the Arizal answers that he was 80 years old. So it says by Rabbi Yechanan Kohen Gadol was the opposite. He lived the whole life as a Kohen Gadol, or most of his adult life. for many years. He went into the Holy of Holies, which means that he didn't have one blemish of a sin. And then Nasan Zduki, at 80 years old, he went off the way. Came at Zduki. So the Rizal says, the Eibishter made that the levushim that he had built up all his life were transferred to Rabbi Eliezer ben Zedaya. So his tshuva got him a ticket into Elam Haba. But to appreciate it, he needed the levushim from Rabbi Yechanan Kohen Gadol. My point being is that neshama is a chelik elokam mal mamash. It's a very powerful piece of the divine. So you could ask, what do you then need Torah mitzvahs for? Neshama is a chelik elokam mal mamash. So the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya that the chelik elokam mamash is something within you. It's like a pilot flame, but you have to express it. And how do you express it? That's through Torah mitzvahs, because they create the garments. Garments here is more than just garments. It's also the instruments. It's also the tools, the methodology. They actualize and express what your neshama is all about. That's what Torah mitzvahs does. Torah mitzvahs itself is not just learning Torah and getting and learning and contemplating on the divine and awakening and giving birth to an emotion, but also bring it into machshava dibur ma'isa, as he keeps saying there in Tanya, thought, speech, and actions, hamislapshim the taryag mitzvahs. Because the taryag mitzvahs that are written in the Torah, the only way they become alive is when the neshama does them in thought, in speech, and action. Again, levushim. So bottom line, mitzvahs overall are the levushim that give the neshama expression and give the neshama an appreciation. It would be like saying someone has a pure soul. Why does he have to go to school? Why does he need teachers? Why does he have to learn? Because without that, you don't have the tools. You don't have the methods how to live your life. You have a pure neshama, but it's completely, what's the word I want to use? It's unrealized. It's unactualized. So essentially, what he's saying here is that he said, neshama b'lei mitzvah, because that's what a mitzvah does. So a mitzvah enters into the physical world, we said, and elevates it, but it elevates it to a level of makif, because mitzvahs are levushim. And that's why he compares it to apsila. Apsila is also like a garment. It's like a thread is a garment. It has something that you could hold on to. It's not unlimited. And it's able to so-called harness the physical world toward Ratzon Elyon, toward God wants, which is what Torah is, the Torah Ohr, the Ohr that's created through the psila of feeding off of the oil. But regardless, what he's talking now, the levushim, the makif that it introduces, that's something that the neshama itself doesn't have levushim without mitzvahs.
But Rabbi, where is
one second. Let me just finish. Mitzvah saying levushim or big day malchus. So you could be a king, you can be a prince, you can be a princess, but there's a concept that we know with big day kahuna, big day malchus. You need to have royal garments. Why does the king need to have royal garments? Because that expresses his kingship. When you see the king dressed in majestic garments, you see him expressing. It's not just he's a melech, his personality is a kingly personality. It's now expressed in real time in the real world. That's levushe malchus. Lias, through this happens, neshama tzrura. Tzrura means it's bound. Because now the neshama is not just a pure naked soul, so to speak, it's bound b'tzrei rachayim. In the bind of life, shemelabeshes u'makefes es haneshama, that encloses and encompasses the soul, la'alesa, to elevate it, ki kol dover shetzorech lalis makifnei seisaviv. Everything you need to elevate. If you want to lift someone up, you have to embrace them. You have to carry them. You have to, some way, be makif and embrace them to elevate them. And that's what mitzvahs do. So it elevates the neshama beyond where it would be on its own. Let me just finish the piece and then I'll stop for questions. And through this makif that the mitzvah provides, hamakifai, and this surrounding element, this encompassing element that encompasses him, he elevates, like shooting a stone with a slingshot. Like he spoke earlier when he spoke about, so he said, he gave the example, B'tzer Even B'margoma, like a stone that's bound, that is bound in a slingshot. What?
Margemo.
Margema. Didn't I say that? Margema. When you bind it in the pouch, like we learned, in the pocket, that's what allows it. A stone you could throw to a certain far distance, but you put it into a lavush, into a garment, a proper way, you can then draw that back, and you can propel it to a completely other level. The same thing, the neshama. The neshama is makif, is encompassed in these garments. The garments elevate and propel the neshama to a completely different state. That it could never have elevated on its own to that place. So even though the neshama has that potential and has the power, but it needs something, and that's what the mitzvahs do. The same thing is the opposite. If God forbid a person transgresses, what it does is it throws him down. It downtrods him. So just like the mitzvah elevates.
It's holding him, not allowing him alone. It's surrounding him.
Yeah, like a weight that keeps him down, that drags him down. Yeah.
Because of the Makif, probably. But there also there is a Makif of the
same idea. The same idea. In other words, your behavior in your thought, speech, and action is not something that's superficial. That has a direct impact on your neshama. That's why he says Tak in Tanya, if you remember, in Perek K, he says the levushim are even higher than the nefesh ruach and neshama, because the levushim can bring you to a place that the neshama itself is not there. He says that clearly in Tanya. Okay.
In Perek Dalet.
Continue, Perek Dalet. I said, hey, Perek Dalet. Yeah. Right. The levushim are the you say dosam le'elo, yeah.
I was by the Fabrengi when the Rebbe spoke about Rabbi Yechanan Kohen Gadol, Rabbi Lozer ben Dordayo. Now, Yechanan Kohen Gadol was 80 years a Kohen Gadol. Not that he became Apikoros when he was 80. 80 years a Kohen Gadol. And he...
Shimesh Shmeinim Shana, and then he became a Tzduki, yeah. Okay.
And then Rabbi Lozer ben Dordayo was his Gilgul. It was the same Neshama. It's not time that his thing was given to Rabbi Lozer ben Dordayo. And because...
It's that result. Okay, I hear.
Yeah, the result. Which I don't understand. What does it mean that the Levushim is Makifim the Neshama leha'aloiso? The Neshama b'Sholsho is even higher than Torah. Maybe it's talking about the way that the neshama is healed to misgale in the nefesh habamis, then it's becoming an aliyah. Correct?
No, not correct.
Why not? What does it mean? The neshama without the
we learned in over 20, 30 pages in Ayin Beis that the neshama lamaila is the neshama lamaila, but then the neshama comes down below. Don't you remember the example that an eye cannot see in the dark? A neshama, once it comes down below, shcheirani, it's darkened. The neshama does not. Look, Maiserav. What would we be like if we just have a neshama and you have no Torah mitzvahs? We wouldn't be able to get out of the trap of this world. Torah mitzvahs provides us with the tools and instruments, divine tools and instruments, to trigger and get and ignite the neshama's fire. But without it, like he says in neshama b'lei mitzvah, it says ein neshama b'lei mitzvah. So you could say, what do you mean? How a neshama l'mayla chelik l'kama ma'amamis? That's the whole Tanya. That Torah mitzvahs is not optional. A neshama must have Torah mitzvahs, because without it would be the equivalent of someone like Korach saying, Kol ha'edik deishim hem, madua tisnasu. What do we need Moshe on? Everyone's Kodesh. A little child can say, I have a chelik l'kama ma'amamis, just like my teacher. Just like the Rebbe. What do I need a Rebbe for? What do I need a teacher for? Why do I need to learn Torah? Why do I need to do mitzvahs? It's not optional. Because the neshama is trapped in this world. It's in Golus. It's in a dark place. Once a neshama uses Torah mitzvahs, it can then elevate, and ultimately the neshama will reach a place. We learned that in Riches, Gdela. He spoke a whole lot of Riches, how neshama is lamaila, then neshama how it's lamata. And sometimes it says Torah is higher than a neshama, and sometimes it says neshama is higher than Torah. The Rebbe Rashab spoke it. You don't remember? Oh, that's a whole line basis about that. And he answers that when neshama is lamaila, it's higher than Torah. When neshama lamata, the Torah is higher than the neshama. The neshama needs Torah. Discussion baraisa bekudshebrichu. The Torah connects it. That's why the Eibishter gave us matan Torah. Anyway, I don't want to go through the whole hadith. Bekitzer nimritz. Yes, the neshama b'lei mitzvah cannot fulfill its purpose. That's the bottom line. It doesn't mean it's not a chelik halikam mamash, fine. But the Alter Rebbe's Perek Beis is followed by Perek Gimel with these abundance of the Meichen and Midah Chabad and Meichen and Midas, and then Perek Dalet and Hey about levushim of Torah mitzvahs, etc., etc. So, and he's explaining why a mitzvah does that, because a mitzvah is like a levush makif, just like it's makifim, like he gave the example of a slingshot, it's able to propel, catapult, springboard. The neshama is to a place, like he says, that ein loy hoya ela klal ma'atzme. He could not go there on his own. And you see it. You see practically, even with Torah mitzvahs, look how challenging life is. But Torah mitzvahs gives us a fighting chance to be able to fulfill our purpose. So to say that someone, for example, the Alter Rebbe said to a chassid, why don't you sit and learn? You could be such a gaon lamdan. So he says, Rebbe, I have such keiches to be a lamdan. What do I have to learn? So he said, just like a ganef is not someone who could steal, but someone who steals, a lamdan is not someone who could learn, but someone who learns. So this is not a small matter. Just to say neshama has great potential, beautiful. That's why we have Avos Yisrael, unconditional, and we don't measure people. But if you want to actualize who you are, it's only through Torah and mitzvahs, through education and through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. That actualizes and elevates and brings a person to a completely different level. And what he would be like without Torah and mitzvahs, he would never actualize his great potential. Okay. Any other questions?
Rabbi,
the Torah does the same thing as the mitzvahs as far as bringing him up with the Makif and schlepping him up. How does Torah exactly fit in with that same? Because you say Torah.
We didn't get, first of all, Torah is also a mitzvah, to learn Torah. Second of all, he didn't yet get to Torah Ohr. He's talking about Ner Mitzvah now.
Oh, okay. Because you kept mentioning it, that's confused me. Thank you.
We'll get to Torah Ohr soon. This is a mitzvah. That. Yeah. Any other questions?
I just wanted to ask you, so in that schema where you have the mitzvah is the pasila, so where is the neshama then? Is it like a parallel world that, like...
What do you mean? A neshama, think of
where is it sitting in the candle?
Think of a person, carpenter. The neshama is the carpenter, and the tools he uses to build something are the mitzvahs.
Right, but when the other example, where
what other example?
Not example, the other where the neshama is the candle of God, is the soul of man, is that
so the soul has tremendous potential. It's born with like a flame, but that flame now needs to be ignited, needs to be nurtured and cultivated. So what's a soul going to be like without education, without training? It would be like a genius musician, a prodigy, but no one ever taught him how to play music or do art.
I understand.
So neshama is a tremendous power. It's a flame. And on its own, it can do some things. Like he said, it can contemplate, it has a mind, but it can never reach these highest levels without the tools, just like a stone could not fly as far without a slingshot. Not sure what you're saying.
I guess if we're just looking at the basic example, like to visualize it. So on one level, we're talking about the animal soul, the the mitzvah, which is the pasilla, and then the flame.
No, one second. I'm talking about the soul now, or the mitzvah. Which one are you talking about? I'm not.
talking about both. Where when you think
I
about
just
both,
gave you an example. There's a carpenter and his tools.
no.
There's an
No, but-
artist and his tools. You need both. You just said
It's the
one
she's
without the
asking-
other is one
Also-
without the other is not complete. A
She's
neshama needs a
asking if-
mitzvah. One second, let me finish. A neshama needs a mitzvah, and a mitzvah needs a neshama. That we just prefaced that. So you're asking me why they need each other? I'm not clear what you're asking me.
No, she's asking you just in the mushal, the simple graphic metaphor, and the mitzvah is the psila in that mushal, Robin.
Well,
Yes,
there's
that
two
is-
different. The word ner, the word candle is used in two different verses. One is used with a soul. Then the divine soul is like a wick. It in turn trains the animal soul, which is the shemen, to love God and create a godly fire. In the mitzvah, Ner Mitzvah, the mitzvah is the wick, which uses the physical world to elevate, but the mitzvah now adds that it elevates it to a place of a makif. So neshama on its own can do something. I didn't say neshama can't. Listen, even if a child has great potential, they probably could figure out some things, but they can never reach their actualized potential without all the tools and all the levushim that the mitzvahs provide.
sure. So is the neshama?
So what's
in
the question?
I mean,
There's
this
two
is
different
really-
verses.
No,
There's
no,
two
I know.
different-
No, she's
There's
trying
two
to find
levels
the
of-
neshama in
They're
the,
two
in the
different
second
canons.
one. You want with
Yeah.
the
I don't understand the question. If somebody
She's
can
trying-
explain,
I
to me, by
understand
all
the
means.
question. She's
What's
trying
the
to.
question?
She wants to know where the neshama fits in the second way of doing it when we're doing in terms of mitzvahs.
What do you
So-
mean the second way? The neshama has to do the mitzvah. He said a mitzvah without a neshama is not complete either. You can't have a mitzvah.
But where
without
is
a
it? Is
neshama.
it the shemen? Is it the flame?
Who says you have to fit that in? Who says that has
No,
to
that's
work?
what she's trying to do. I don't know.
That's my
I don't
question.
say who. It's not. It's two separate verses. One verse says the soul is compared to a candle. Another verse says the mitzvah is compared to a candle. So he's explaining each one separately. Then they come together. The candle of the neshama works with the candle of the mitzvah.
Okay.
Rabbi, you said you gave her the answer. The mitzvah is the psila in that mushal.
And no, but in the neshama is the psila.
Right. That's all she needed. You gave her all the information she needs. She needs to think about it. But you
Let's
gave
see.
her,
So that I mean,
She wants to know where the neshama is in the second mushal.
That's
it's the wick. It's the wick. He said it 3
at
times.
the same time that the mitzvah is the wick. That's
no,
my
Yes,
it's
question.
not
two
the way.
separate
I did not
muscles.
say that. I
No.
can speak for myself. I did not say that. There's two separate verses. Go back to the bottom of 39c, B. He says there are two levels of ner. Each of them have 3 elements. A neshama has a wick, oil, and a flame, and a mitzvah has a wick, oil, fuel, and a flame. 2 separate things. Then they interact. 2 flames interacting, if you wish.
If
That's-
you have a mitzvah,
That's all he says, nothing more. We don't need to complicate matters.
I'm sorry.
need both of them. If you have the mitzvah only and you don't have the neshama,
Everybody has a different agenda. That we know. That
No,
I just
sure.
said. Anyway, we can
What-
listen. We
need
can't
to-
have.
because if you have the mitzvah,
One second. One second. Hold on. Hold on. Can I speak? Is your question answered or not answered?
I have to think about it. It's quite kind
I
of.
mean, this is not science. This is not a science discussion. This doesn't have to work. You don't need to have every detail in the mitzvah. You don't have to find the neshama in the mitzvah.
Okay.
It's two forces interacting with each other.
They
A
will
soul
come-
does a mitzvah. That's all you need to know. And both of them have the 3 elements.
Okay.
And it's in stages. He even said there's even stages. First we pray in davening, the soul activates, the animal soul creates a fire. Then that prepares it to be able to do the mitzvahs, which elevate the animal soul even further, all the way to transform it into Torah Ohr. This we learned in the first mimer. If you go back, it's all very clearly spelled out.
if there would be no neshama, how would it be? The Alter Rebbe said you need both.
Well, that's not what we're discussing now. That's not the discussion, Abshleim. That's not what's being asked here. That we know. We've already learned that.
No,
A
she's
mitzvah
asking.
without a neshama is like having a tool chest without a builder. So
Okay.
that's not what we're discussing now.
That's what she's asking.
It's not what she's asking, but
But
okay.
that's what you said now.
She's here. She could tell you what she's asking. That's not what she was asking. But
I guess what I'm saying is, so you have
listen,
like if
listen.
one.
Robin, why don't you think
Sorry.
about it? And if you want to write
I
down
will.
your question, because I don't understand the question, to be
I
honest.
understand, and I'm sorry.
And
I will get back. I'm sorry for taking so much time. I apologize.
nothing to apologize. Trying to understand what you're saying. It's not the apology. Trying to understand.
I will write it to you, and then I maybe I'll be able to explain it better.
Okay.
Write it to me too, Robin, because I might learn something from your question.
It's the quantum thing. That's it. That they're happening at the same time. They're two different candles.
I don't understand what you're saying. Everything in life is 1,000 things happening the same.
Let me think about
when you eat a meal, how many things are interacting? There's a human being taking food and intake. It's a simple thing. There's a human eating a piece of food. There's a neshama doing a mitzvah. That's all you need to know. It's two things interacting. They don't have to be one. Okay. So let's just read a few more lines. So then he continues and says, Ulechein, leifshim atalis b'tfil kedem atfila keneda. And that's why we dress in a talis, in a prayer shawl, and tefillin before davening. So this again going back to things that he discussed earlier in the original mimer, 38c. So he said that you begin by putting on talis and tefillin because levush, a talis and tefillin is in mitzvahs itself. It's a very obvious garment. They're both garment. Because like he said before, anything you want to elevate, how do you lift something up? You have to embrace it. You have to hold on to it. So first you have to have an elyon that comes down. And that's the Makif. That's the Makif of talis and tefillin that comes down. That is the one that elevates the person. And now he continues and says, and this is the manner which tisapech hanefesh hasichlis ma'er shalamayla betfila. And this is the power that allows you to transform the nefesh hasichlis, the human, the intelligent soul, in an Ohr above. How do we take a human intelligence and elevate it to the divine during davening? This manner. So in addition to what a neshama can do on its own, what he's saying here clearly, the mitzvah of talis and tefillin. And remember, a neshama on its own does not have talis and tefillin. It's a mitzvah it has to do. This mitzvah surrounds the neshama, surrounds the person, and allows him to elevate the nefesh hasichlis during davening even more than the neshama would have done on its own. And that's why every day we daven the same prayer. Mashenkin Teda, not like Teda. Teda hitzricha dafka hischachus. Teda needs every day to learn something new. Ayin zehar breishis bagdama. The Zohar in the Gam and Bereshis, the Alter Rebbe said it earlier, but he didn't bring the Zohar. Says that every day, La Fosha, you need to be mechadish, you need to innovate. That's Torah. But when it comes to Tefillah, we learned it's all one Aveda of elevating the animal soul. Every day, another spark that was allocated. A person in his lifetime is allocated a certain amount of sparks to elevate. The sparks that go into the animal soul in this physical world. So every day you elevate another spark, but it's all of one purpose, one mission. Could call you Shivim Shana, because his years are, as the pasuk says, are 70 years. Bottom line, he's allocated in his lifetime a certain amount of sparks. This is referring to the number of sparks from the animal soul that he needs to refine. And since it's all part of one process, that's why every day is the same tefillah, like he said earlier. Mashenkin nefesh alikis nitzchis. The nefesh alikis is a different story. It's nitzchis. Nefesh alikis is always new, is forever, is eternal, and as an eternal entity, it's not a self-contained amount of sparks that you have to elevate, and that's why the nefesh alikis is not in this category. The nefesh habamis. This is what he adds. What we learned earlier, he said, achas. It's all one halah. Now he's adding something more. It's not just one halah. He's saying it's the nefesh nitzchis. So I'm assuming nitzchis here means it's not, you never end. It's not like it comes 70 years, it's over. The nefesh alikis lives on forever. The nefesh habamis, once you refined it, you refined it. So every day the davening is all about doing different sparks of one self-contained animal soul. That's how explaining why it's one nusach. Nimtze. So what do we derive from this? Ha-mitzvah ibchinas psila shabah. I'm sorry. Ibchinas psila. Mitzvah is the level of the wick. Shabah v'al-yodei nichla hashemen ba'ir. Like the wick, in it and through it, the shemen, the oil gets consumed. Nichla shemen, this oil gets consumed and turned into oir, into light. Kach al yidei ha-mitzvahs, just like in that moshel, that is the wick that draws and transforms and consumes the oil, gets consumed and turns into light or fire. Kach al yidei ha-mitzvahs, the same as with the mitzvahs, like a wick. Hu aliyas nefesh ha-sichlis the klippas nega, it elevates the nefesh ha-sichlis of klippas nega, v'gam klaf ha-tefillin, and also the parchment of the tefillin, the klippas nega, umoyes tzedakah, and the money you give to charity. Probably he's bringing that because you also give tzedakah before you daven. Yav prutalai v'hadar matzlit. All of that is like a wick that is engaging with the material world, which is the shemen. Lichlol be'edein seh baruch hu, and the goal is to direct it to lichlol, to be encompassed and absorbed in the infinite divine light. Ki sheirish ha-mitzvahs hem b'malchus da'atzilus. Because the root of mitzvahs is malchus da'atzilus. Malchus is like a wick that engages with biyah, with this material world, and ki b'malchus da'atzilus ki teira hi b'chinas zah. Teira is higher than that. Teira is zah. Mitzvahs same b'malchus, mitzvahs hamelech, and mitzvahs are malchus, which is a lower level, like the psila, not like the light of Torah. That's mitzvahs hamelech, meaning the commandments of the laws of the king. Mitzvahs hamelech, malchus. Already finished till the end of the paragraph. Ach lefi shenot seifim b'tchila son, but because the beginning is wedged in the end. Hari ha-malchus d'Atzilus elad malchus to Ein Sof Mamish. So malchus of Atzilus, and this process goes all the way up to malchus of Ein Sof Mamish. If you remember, we learned the beginning of this mimer. We spoke about Torah Ohr. He said malchus goes all the way up to the root of the kav, Hamida, of the psila of the weak is malchus of Ein Sof. And then ulechein al yidei zeh eila nefesh hasichus be'ed Ein Sof Mamish. And through that elevates the nefesh sichlis elevates even further, all the way to Ein Sof Mamish Lifnei Tzimtzum, K'neidish Achar Abir M'Shem Ban Nasa Shem Sag. As we know, that once you have the bitter of Shem Ban, which is how the nitzutzes are in the Gematria Behema Ban, it elevates it to Sag, which is Tehu, the intense energies, but in this case even higher, all the way to before the Tzimtzum, which is Dafka, that comes from below, you elevate all the way up to the highest levels, which really is the level of Torah Ohr, like we learned. So essentially, the process is like this. The neshama is a wick that has a certain impact on the animal soul. And it could take it and prime the animal soul. The animal soul can get the love and the reverence of the divine soul to a bligvul level. But a mitzvah does a lot more, and Torah does a lot more. That allows the neshama to refine the animal soul and the world, the physical world, to levels that the neshama on itself could not reach. And that's the psila, and that's the ner of mitzvah and Torah Ohr. Ner Mitzvah engages with the world and elevates it, and Torah Ohr is the Ohr Ein Sof Mamish that you reach through all this process. But we said we reach Ohr Ein Sof also through the neshama alone. So you have to say this is on a far higher level, because now you have the levushim of mitzvahs and Torah. Like he said, that's what he said. Neshama b'lei mitzvah is not complete. Is not an neshama b'lei mitzvah.
But
They both need each other, so they interact.
Both. But I think you said
correct.
before.
Anyway, so that is
totally.
Let me just sum up. So that's the summation of this whole discussion that we're talking about, how now they interact with each other. We'll obviously talk about this a lot more, how they in Ayin Beis, as I mentioned, there's a whole discussion how Torah helps the neshama grow, and then how the neshama in turn feeds the Torah too. He's not talking about that right now, but he's definitely, they go back and forth. But right now he's talking about, first it starts with the neshama, then it moves into mitzvahs, which also is the order. You daven, then comes Shema v'hafta, then mitzvahs, and after davening we learn the Beis HaKnesses, the Beis HaMedrash. So it really also fits in the whole order of the morning of what we go from tefillah and tefillah itself to mitzvahs to Torah.
But don't forget that
giving a little tzedakah before davening, which is a mitzvah. That was mentioned also, you know.
Yeah, there's also learning chassidus before davening too. So there's a constant.
But the Torah is ikon v'yisoidoison b'mitzvah, because the mitzvah is no tchiloson b'seifon, so it's reaching. Of course, Torah bringing it, but it depends on the mitzvah.
Well, remember the key thing he said that Torah is, the lashon he used was Torah l'fneinu hen ikram v'yisoidoson hi b'mitzvahs. Let's not forget that. The Torah's nechaz, Torah Ohr, the fire needs to have the psila. That's where it's nechaz. That's where it holds on to. That's where it's channeled. Because remember, the goal is not just to reach Ohr Ein Sof. The goal is to reach that this nefesh hasichlis, the nefesh habamis, should reach Ohr Ein Sof. So the goal is not just to go up there. The goal is to elevate. So mitzvahs serve a critical role because they're like the wick. Without a wick, that's why the ikar of a ner is a wick. Without a wick, you don't have a flame. You don't have a fire. If it was just fire and oil, it wouldn't work. That he made a big thing about that. So the psila serves as an in-between. What needs to be discussed more is how how the mitzvahs and Torah elevate the neshama even higher. But that's where Ayin Beis comes in. That's why I said you cannot, even though the eye has the power to see, but in this world it needs an outside light. He called that Torah Ohr. And Ner Mitzvah, you need an outside light to it. That's the whole point in Ayin Beis. This whole section, Ayin Beis, starting from page 1350, is about how the Torah mitzvahs gives the light to allow the neshama to shine and actualize itself in this world. And then the neshama will reach a place, even higher than Torah Ohr and Ner Mitzvah, as Ayin Beis discusses. We'll learn about that more later. But right now, that's what he said here. Okay. Are there any questions? All clear? Good. Yeah, and you have
I
to
think
go
at
back.
this time now, he summarized that you need the Ner of the neshama. Ner Mitzvah is on Noichi, and that brings the Torah. But we have to remember that you need the Ohr HaNeshama also.
Obviously.
He's saying
Okay.
it.
Obviously, he started, the whole thing started with Ner Hashem. Without a neshama, you have nothing. Without a neshama, you don't have anything to fulfill all these Torah mitzvahs. A neshama has to learn and to do mitzvahs, yeah. Okay, so we'll stop here. We finished 39D, believe. Yeah, the end of the paragraph. And when comes Makif l'Sheves.